Hi everyone, I'm here to share with you a tutorial on how I made the Pyramid Explosion album. Here I am showing you a preview of what the finished tutorial project looks like. For this project, I used the beautiful papers from Stamperia's Time is an Illusion. I love the 3D effect they have on the paper pieces and the 12 by 12 sheets and the cut aparts. I did modify this tutorial for some added features, some additional embellishments that I added that is different from the original one. And I'll put a link in the description box for the original one that I made. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll need a 6.5 by 6.5 piece of medium weight chipboard for the base and a 6.5 by 8-inch piece for the sides. And you're going to mark at halfway on that top part of that piece. So on the 6.5 inch side, you want to mark a halfway mark, which is 3 1/4. And I'll show you why in a minute. You're going to need 4 smaller triangles to make the top. So again, you want to, I use my paper trimmer to cut chipboard. I just use an old blade. And to do this, you want to line up that bottom edge, the corner, with that halfway mark, the 3 1/4 in this case. Slide your blade a couple of times to cut the chipboard. And then you're going to take your straight edge X-Acto knife, whatever tool you use, and just finish the edge. I believe for me, it makes a nice clean edge and I'm even every single time and my hand doesn't split. So you're going to cut 4 of those for your sides. Then, as you know, if you've watched some of my videos before, you know I love using the craft mailing tape that has the adhesive on there that you activate with water. I love using this for projects that are going to be used a lot or I need the strength. I am just making several pieces by marking the length of my side, and then I'm cutting strips and I'm folding those in half with the adhesive side facing each other. I'm wetting the brush with just plain water, not too much, and I am applying that to the sides of the base, all 4 sides, making sure I burnish those down very well. If you miss a piece with water, you can always go back. If you don't get your tape lined up perfectly, so long as you don't burnish too hard, you could lift that tape up and reactivate the adhesive and then burnish down really well. You want to trim up any of the corner sides so that you have even amount of tape on every side and not too much bulk. You really don't want a whole lot of bulk because we're going to be adding more on the sides. So I'm burnishing down that really well. And then just like with any other album cover, you want to make sure you leave a gap so that your paper doesn't crack, your tape doesn't crack, and that your sides will open and close easily. I'm cutting my angles just like with any other album cover. I'm cutting my angles on the sides, on the corners, applying water and applying the triangle side piece on the chipboard. Now I can tell you, if you're going to use the outside edge of your chipboard, use the outside edge all the way through. If you use the inside, do the same. Whatever you commit to with that first piece. Otherwise, your pyramid's not going to be squared up in this case, even though we're talking about a pyramid. It's not going to be squared up and your sides are going to be off. So I chose to use the outer edge of that base to place my triangle sides. And so I'm going to do that on all 4 sides of the pyramid cover. So again, I'm just lining that up and smoothing that down really, really well. And it's okay if you have a little bit of a gap on those sides because for this tutorial, we're going to be adding some cardstock. and that will fill in the gap, and you'll see that a little bit later. The more embellishments you use, the wider the gap will be, and you may see that on the original Pyramid Explosion album that I did. And there you can see that I did leave a gap in between the 6.5-inch square base and each of the sides. So then what you want to do is you want to fold your strips of tape where the adhesive part is on the outside, and then you want to score that and burnish that down really, really well. Even though it's going to be flat, the more you burnish, the easier it is for your sides to open and close. So you're going to do the same method by wetting it down and laying that folded edge inside that gap, and then burnish down really well. And then you're going to want to clean up any bulk that you see in the corners where the angles of the triangles meet. So you want to do that all the way around. Another really good thing about using this mailing tape is it has really, I think they're nylon fibers that run through the paper, so it's more additional strength. So it's really not going to fall apart if you don't put too much water and you make sure that you burnish all of your edges down nicely. And that's what I'm doing here, just smoothing everything out. And then you want to use your bone folder to train the sides to come up and down. So you want to do that a couple of times. And then here I am just cleaning up those corners where the paper is hanging over the edge, because you don't want that bulk there. At this point, you don't have to use cardstock strips for the edges. You can paint the tape. I suggest that you use gesso before you do that, and then you can paint with anything you'd like to paint with, preferably an acrylic paint. As you can see here, I've already started applying my strips of cardstock on the edges and in the inside and outside part of the cover. It's a 1-inch strip of cardstock, the length of the side of the triangle, and I scored at 1/2. Then you want to fold that over and burnish it really well. And then apply, if you're using double-sided tape, you're going to apply it so that it doesn't go over that folded line. And you want to burnish that down really well so it looks like that. And then you just want to make sure that you have a strip that's long enough. On the top and bottom edges of your strip, you're going to want to cut a little triangular notch out of a little angled notch. You can see there what I'm doing there. Just a little snip on each side of that fold line on the top and the bottom. And then again, I didn't burnish it well enough, so you want to burnish your tape down. And then you want to line it up. Take one piece of tape off at a time, because if you take all of the tape off and you don't have your alignment right, it's going to be a little challenging getting it all off and repositioned. So you just want to line up the edge of that triangle with the folded inside fold of that. Don't go over the fold, just go up to that fold. And then you want to burnish that down really well. Now you can see at the top of the triangle that my strip overlaps on the other one. It's a matter of personal preference. If you don't like the way it looks, you can do what I'm doing here, and that's removing that piece off the top so that it's not overlapping. You really are not going to see it once you put the outside mat on the cover, but if it bothers you, you can do the same. Then you want to remove the tape and fold over to the inside your strip of chipboard. Angle the piece of edge there, the 1-inch piece of cardstock, so that it's nice and clean. Again, it's a matter of personal preference. Whatever you do, just make sure you burnish everything down really well. I like my edges flat, so that's why I'm running my bone folder with a little bit of pressure on that edge so that it's nice and flat. And then you want to, again, retrain the chipboard to fold up and fold back. You're going to repeat the same process for the inside part. This will form like a black decorative edge on the inside of your Explosion mini album. And then I'm just using my scissors to trim up the angles, basically kind of giving it a miter. Again, you're not going to see a lot of this once you put the mats, the cardstock mats on there. But if you're like me, and I tend to be a little crazy when it comes to clean edges, you're going to want to do that. So trim up those angles. And then again, train your paper to fold in. You may need to apply a little bit of pressure, not too much, but that's what I'm doing here. I'm just making sure that the pyramid closes, and you can see it does close really neatly on those outside edges, and that's what you really want to see. So you may have to do it a couple of times. Just be gentle, but it will definitely come together. And again, we're going to be making a topper, so that will keep it closed. You just want to make sure your sides are even. So once you're satisfied with that, you can start preparing your pieces for the inside cover matting. At this point, if you're going to want to distress your edges of your mats and your layers, I suggest that you go ahead and do so. So you'll need 4 pieces that are 6 inches by 7.5. That's going to be your inside cover mat. And then you're going to need a square base that is 6 1/4 square, and that'll be your base mat. And again, if you want to distress your edges, I suggest you do this before you start gluing everything down. It's just easier. So here you can see where you have a little bit of black cardstock on your edges there. We won't see the thick pieces because again, we're going to be matting that, and we're going to do the same procedure that we did with the cover. With that 6 by 7.5 piece of cardstock, you're going to mark the center, which is 3, and I'm showing you here with that arrow. And then once you get that lined up and then a little tick mark there, and here I'm showing you it's 7.5 inches long by 6.5 inches wide, and a 3-inch mark that marks the center. That'll be the peak of the triangle, just like before. Right there. If you make this smaller or wider, you'd have to make the adjustments, obviously. And then in your paper trimmer, you're going to switch out that old blade that you used for the chipboard, and you're going to put your new blade in, or your newer blade for your cardstock. Don't forget to do that. I've done that a couple of times. Line up that little tick mark with the channel in your trimmer. Line up the outer edge of your paper to the channel, and then you're going to slide your trimmer blade straight down. And then you're going to line up the peak of your triangle with the bottom edge of the paper, and again, slide your trimmer blade up. And then there you have your 6 by 7.5 inch triangle mat for the inside cover. And once you get all 4 cut out, distressed if you want to, then you can lay out the next layer. And here I'm showing you where you see where we had the larger black pieces no longer are large because now they're centered with the mat. So that disappears a little bit. So you have a nice mat. Then you can start to, after you get all 4 of those cut out, you can start to work on the second layer of your album. And the second layer, you need a 6-inch square for your base. And then you will need a 6-inch square for your base. And then you will need a triangle that is 6 inches by 8 1/4, and you're going to score that straight bottom edge at 1/4 inch. So here I'm using some craft cardstock, and there is the 6-inch square. And then you want to take your scoreboard or a scoring tool and score that bottom straight edge of the triangle at 1/4. I guess at this point, before you cut the triangle, you could score that 1/4, but I wanted to make sure that I had a straight 1/4 edge on my triangle. So you just want to line it up on your scoreboard and score at 1/4. Then you want to take and go ahead and burnish that score line down really well. And then you're going to apply some adhesive onto that 1/4 inch flap. You don't want to apply too much, or if you're using a tape runner or double-sided tape, you don't want to go over that folded scored line, because you want the sides to flap in and out. And if you go over that fold, it's not going to be squared up. So you just want to lay that base piece up to that scored fold, not over the scored fold. And make sure that it is adhered to that base really, really well. So go ahead and burnish that down nicely and clean up if you're using any liquid glue. And since we're working with angles, it's a good idea not to glue all the layers down but wait and make sure that you have even spacing on each layer before you glue all of them down. It's just really easier to do. And so you'll go ahead and cut 4, and you'll also attach the other 3 sides there to layer number 2. And from here, then we can start to work on our pocket that's going to go on the outside of layer number 2, the outside sides of layer number 2. You're going to want a strip of cardstock or the designer paper that is at least 1 3/4. If you're going to make it exactly the way I did it, 1 3/4. It could be smaller or it could be bigger if you want. I am not giving you the length measurement for this pocket piece because everyone's cutting is a little different. But you do want to measure the length based on the length of where you're placing your pocket on the outside of the triangle. And I'll show you that in just a minute. But whatever you want to do, you want to score on 3 sides, the 2 sides and the bottom of the pocket piece. You want to distress the pocket piece. If that's what you're going to do it now. It's much easier to do before than after. You want to burnish your score lines really well and check your alignment with the piece. Make sure you're lined up. So to measure your strip, you're just going to want to lay your strip out of cardstock and then draw a reference point for where you are to score the lines. You don't want the pocket piece to show on the inside of your layer 2. And as you can see, I did angle the corner edges to reduce the bulk on the corners and then on the top sides of the pocket. This really does help reduce the bulk so that your cardstock side is not sagging because your pocket's so heavy. And if you're going to put tags and such on the inside, you don't want that to happen. So once you're satisfied, then you want to put your adhesive on the 3 sides where you made the 1/4 inch flap again, checking alignment to make sure that you're not showing through on the other side. So you want to go ahead and apply your adhesive on the 3 sides, and then you're going to lay it down so that it's flush on the base of the triangle side and then on each left and right side, adjusting where possible and where needed, and then burnishing always to make sure you have a good connection between the pocket and the side of layer number 2. And that's what I'm doing here with my bone folder. Just really making sure that it's on there. Really good, that pocket's on there. And it's laying flat. More importantly, that you want your pocket laying flat. You don't want a gap in that pocket, because then it'll also sag, and then whatever you put in it, it's not going to stay in it when you open and close the album sides. And here I'm just going to show you that just with a piece of paper, I'm going to show you that the pocket is laying nice and flat and that you can stick something nicely inside it. So you're going to want to do that on all 4 sides. If you want to choose to make the same album that I'm making, you could put it on 1 side, you can put it on 2 sides. It's completely up to you what you choose to do. And so for this next segment, we're going to be making layer number 3. And for layer number 3, you need a 5.5 by 7.5 piece for your triangle, scored at the bottom at 1/4, and then a 5.5 inch square for the base layer. And you're going to follow the steps just like you did for the layer number 2. You're going to score the bottom edge, and you're going to apply your adhesive, and then you're going to attach the base to the scored piece, the 1/4 inch scored piece. And then what you're going to do is going to apply the 3rd layer to the 2nd layer once you are sure where your placement's going to be. And you want to make sure that you have even sides on the square base part, but you also want to make sure that you have even distance on each of the triangle sides. So you may have to play around a little bit on the 3rd layer to make sure you have the right position for your angled pages. And that's what I'm checking for in this segment right here. Once you're satisfied with that, you can go ahead and apply your adhesive to the bottom base, that square, making sure that you have enough adhesive down to support whatever embellishments that you're going to do, but not too much that it bleeds over onto the sides of your triangle. And here is another good reason why I like using liquid adhesive for placement, is because you have a little bit of wiggle room. You can slide it around a little bit and get yourself nice and even. You can also achieve this with double-sided tape or a tape runner. You would just lightly tack the center and then use that center tack to move your pieces around a little bit until you're nice and square. Once you're satisfied, then you can go ahead and burnish layer number 3 down after you make your adjustments, and you will be able to move on to the next spot. One downer about liquid glue: if you get a little bit messy or too much, it will bleed off to the side. If you clean it really quickly, you won't see it. In the case of the smudges that you see here, I'm going to be matting this, so you're not going to see them at all. But you do want to be mindful when you're going to clean up as quickly as possible, and be mindful if you're going to mat or not mat, because that will show. So you do want to do a bit of cleanup. Otherwise, it's really great to use for placement of items just like this, where you need to be have a little wiggle room when you do the placement. And this burnished everything down really nicely. And then I'm going to fold up here and just make sure that I like the way the whole album is folding up. that is, nothing's hanging over the cover or the chipboard part of the album. You don't want that to happen on the top or on the sides, and you can see it opens pretty easily and it closes nice and cleanly. Next, we're going to work on the outer matting. Now, in all fairness, I did use my Silhouette software and my Cameo to cut these pieces. However, if you don't have a die cutting machine, you can certainly do this by hand. You're going to cut the main triangle piece the same way we've done throughout this tutorial. And then what you're going to do is find an oval object or find an oval shape that you may have in your embellishments to make that center oval that's inside the main printed designer paper. Once you have your oval, what you're going to do is draw a reference point on the back cover of your chipboard so that you know once you glue it that you are centered on that piece, and that cardstock is not going to show on the outside. You're going to go ahead and apply your adhesive on the back of the oval there, and then you're going to use those reference lines to place that back onto your chipboard cover. And again, we're working on the outside part of our chipboard. And then you're just going to embellish and burnish that down, make sure it has good contact on the chipboard. You are going to erase any lines that you think might show through. And again, burnish down and adjust where possible and where needed. And then take that template with your designer paper and just double check to make sure you're centered and you're not showing any of that black matting or the brown of the chipboard showing through that mat. For the two slivers or the crescents that are going to be placed on either side of the main matted piece, you just take those from the template that you made from the oval, and they could be as thin or as wide as you like. Here I am just applying a little bit of glue. I did burnish, embellish, or distress, however you'd like to say, the edges of the liner. I'm going to call it the liner, so that I am consistent throughout. And then you're going to lay the piece down so you have a little bit of the craft, in this case, showing on the outside, but not on the outer portion of the main matte piece, the printed paper. So I'm making adjustments here. And then once you are happy with the width of what that looks like on the inside, then you can trim off anything that's showing on the outside. Again, this is another good application for liquid adhesive because you have a little bit of wiggle room before the adhesive is stuck to the paper. And then I'm just trimming off what I can see is showing through on that outer edge, just really carefully so that I don't distort the outer edge of my printed paper. And then you may want to go ahead and distress your edges again so that you're hiding that white core of the paper. So you're going to do the same thing on the other side with the sliver, the little crescent coordinating piece. You can leave a gap at the top and at the bottom of the placement because we will be embellishing that a little bit. You don't want the gap to be too big because the larger the gap with these pieces at the bottom of your main printed mat, the harder it will be to cover with embellishments. You'll just have to do a better job at covering the gap because you kind of want it to look like it's perfectly centered and to the point. Once you are happy with that and you've trimmed off all of the excess accent pieces, then what you want to do is apply adhesive to your printed paper on the back side. So right now you're looking at the front side where you see the words on this particular mat is going to be the back side. For the top, you're going to apply adhesive all over the top. But for the outer sides and the bottom, you're not going to want to fill that in if you want to use the outer edge of your album cover as pockets the way I showed you in the beginning of the tutorial. If you don't want to make them a pocket, then you are going to fill in glue all the way around and on the inside pieces of that mat. And then you want to take and line it up with the outer cover, making sure that you have even amounts of your coordinating black trim or whatever color that you use to cover your sides of your triangles. And then again, cleaning up any adhesive that might leak through and making sure that your sides are really stuck down. Because this is the outer of the album, you want to make sure that you don't have any lifting. So far, I have used this method of liquid glue on albums, and I never have the edges lift up years. So I know it really works for me. You have probably tried it too, and it works for you. But I really like this method, although you just have to be really diligent in cleaning up any excess liquid glue. But by burnishing your edges, your bone folder will force that glue to the outside edges, and that way it covers more of the edge, and it really helps make it lay down nicely. So that's why I'm taking really care and making sure those edges are laid down nice. So then I'm folding it up, and as you can see here, it matches. And then what you're gonna want to do is take those small triangles and you're going to glue them together the same way we did with the box, with the mailing tape. But before you close that last edge, you want to double check and make sure it's going to close your box nice and tight. And that's what I'm doing here. Just checking and making sure that I'm going to have a nice tight edge. I fast forward this up to show you the base. This is just a $1.50 base, wood base that I got from Michael's. I applied some gesso. I applied some Liquitex Mars Black acrylic paint, my favorite go-to. It has a nice sheen, it dries fast, and you don't need a lot of it. Now for their Lazy Susan base, I get my 4-inch bases from Amazon. You can buy them in sets of 4. You can buy them one a piece. It's a good price. I believe it's under $6 for the set. And you want to center it on your box. I do not use screws because what I use for attaching my Lazy Susan bases is Gorilla Glue Clear. It dries strong and it dries clear, and it's worked perfectly for me. The manufacturer recommends for non-porous surfaces that you do wet them first. So that's why I am applying a little bit of water on the side that I'm going to attach to my wood base. And you just want to be mindful, stay away from the holes, but apply enough of the adhesive down where you're going to get really good contact, and and also be sure not to interfere with that top layer of the Lazy Susan that's going to be attached to the bottom base of your album. So once you found center, you just want to lay it down on your base. And the reason why I'm using a base, and this is something that I learned from the last album that I made, is with your embellishments, they will drag if you don't put it on a base. So to lift it up will help the album to rotate freely once the pages are open. And I just used a brick to weight it down. So let's talk about the final review of this project. There you can see that I did make tags for the outside pockets of the album. Gorgeous papers. And the time is an Illusion paper collection from Stamperia. If you don't have it in your collection, you could pick it up. The flowers, the tea-dyed ones are from Recollection. The rosy colored ones and the darker ones are all from 49 and Market. The chain detail is from Tim Holtz and from my jewelry making collection. and I will open up box up and show you the components. There are the beautiful three-dimensional looking papers and cut aparts from Stamperia, Time is an Illusion. I made a little open tag holder for the inside cover. I made little photo mats. I used every bit of the paper. Here I made a little photo booklet using some Melissa Francis ribbon. I took some of the coordinating blue to use it as a photo mat or a journaling, and that fits in the pocket nicely. Here's another three-dimensional look cut apart with the keyhole in the paper collection. And here are some tags that I made with my Stampin' Up! Small scallop punch and some washi tape from Recollections on that blue. And then I made the punch pocket that I usually do in all of my projects with the Stampin' Up! Punch. And I'm showing you that right there. It fits perfectly with the 2-inch tag punch. And the pocket is really generous. You can put a 3x5 easily into that pocket. And I just showed you that Stampin' Up! Small scallop punch. Here is another cut apart that I made, and I just glued it open-ended so that a tag could fit inside. I made a little booklet here. I had a metal embellishment. I used some twine to close it up. And on the inside, I made a signature out of some copy paper, and I made some homemade tea stain. I just took a tea bag and made some extra strong tea, and then I sprayed it with, I put it in a spray bottle, I sprayed it, and then I crumpled the paper up, and I actually set the paper unfolded outside because it was warm. It was a warm day for it to dry. You could use a hair dryer, you could use your heat gun. Just be careful if you use a heat gun because you can actually set the paper on fire. Don't ask me how I know that, just that I do know that. Careful with the heat gun. I used my cart postal stamp, and I just stamped a little bit off on each of the pages just to add a little dimension on the signature. This little piece came from the front of the paper collection because I truly used almost every single piece of paper in the collection. I love it so much. I used my mini banner punch from Stampin' Up! To make the little embellishments that you see there on the side of that little tag. And just used some black cardstock to mat it there. And then here I took one of the 4x6 cut aparts, add a little key embellishment on it, added a magnet on it so that it will close. And you will see that here. I'm going to put a tag in there and you know that it closes. So another really gorgeous element in the paper collection there. Here is another 4x6 tag. I scored it in half. There I'm showing you the insert for it. I made a pocket. I folded it in half. I distressed it. I took my blade and I just cut one of the lines to make a pocket. And the tag sits neatly in the pocket. And then made that piece a pocket for that tag. You see the washi tape. For the little floret, I took my little mini scallop, 7/8 of an inch Stampin' Up! Punch. In between each of the scallops, I snipped, and then I distressed everything. I tea stained it and glued the layers together to make the rosette. Another gorgeous cut apart. This too has a magnet in it so that you can hold something there. I actually didn't try to hide the metal disc on this one. I just took a gear and used some glossy accents for that element. I fussy cut the heart so a tag could slip in there. And then it closes nice and easy there. And then I'm showing you some additional tags on the inside of layer number 2. And some of the other cut apart elements, and then also the journaling card. To make the little flower that you see there, I used my mini flower from Stampin' Up. I just took some of the tea stain paper, cut out 3 of the little flowers, and then what I did was I staggered as I glued each layer, I staggered in between each petal to give the flower effect, and then I crumpled that up a little bit very carefully after the adhesive had dried to make the little flower that you see. It's a bit tedious to do, but I like the little effect, and it kind of mimics the lighter color rose in the tag on that side of the layer number 2 that you're seeing right there. So a little bit of fussing, but I like the way the result, it gives me that 3-dimensional look that I wanted to. And that's what you see there. And then I just popped up the heart on a foam square after I fussy cut it. That was a cut apart element. I had some gears in my collection from Bead Landing, and I used the glossy accent to adhere it. This is layer 3 on the inside. I used my Stampin' Up! Small tab punch to make the little tabs that you see there. I used Mia Bella from SCI ephemera packet for the little iridescent flowers that you see there. I used my Stampin' Up! Mini punch to make the pocket insert and then little tags. The envelope comes from Mia Bella as well. Has a magnet in it. You could put some keepsake, but I just cut a piece of that paper and to use it as an embellishment. 2 more tags, and then I carefully fussy cut around that design to make it a pocket. Just really carefully cut around there, and then it makes a pocket on the base part of layer number 3. I used some metal hardware. The hardware is actually from Prima Marketing, and the little charm you see there is from my collection of ephemera, again using glossy accents. There it is, the Pyramid Explosion mini album. I certainly hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I enjoyed doing it for you. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up on my YouTube channel. You can also see this project on my blog. So if you don't see something on YouTube from me, then certainly jump over to my blog. I want to appreciate you watching, and thanks again. Have a good day.